We're in a new era of champions, and there's good and there's bad. So it looks like we are officially and clearly in a new era of champions and really a new era of MMA and UFC in general. Seems like everybody has a grappling base, or at the very least can grapple. Seems like pure striking isn't viable, and practically everyone at the top comes from the Caucasus Mountains region. With Alex Pereira being the last champion connected to the past era, we've officially moved on from Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, Francis Ngannou, the Three Kings era that dominated 2019 up until now. Technically, we still haven't moved on from Volkanovski since he's fighting for the belt next month, so he could, in theory, continue this era, but that's not a guarantee considering he's facing a young, red-hot, and dangerous Diego Lopez. But however way you look at it, it's clear that we're in the beginning of a new era of champions. For visual sake, and with Ilia Topuria still technically being the featherweight champion up until Volk and Diego Lopez fight next month, let's just put Ilia in the list. So, of the champions right now, the longest reigning champion is Islam Makhachev with an impressive 4 title defenses and a reign lasting now almost 3 years. Following Makhachev is Pantoja, who won his belt back in 2023 and has 3 title defenses and an underrated reign over the flyweight division. Then everyone else is practically brand new. Merab just won the belt at the end of last year and just banked 1 title defense earlier this year. Ilia Topuria won the belt a year ago and added another featherweight goat to his resume thereafter. Dricus du Plessis won the belt last year and got 2 defenses since then. And finally, Magomed Ankalaev literally just became champion a couple weeks ago. And yeah, we don't talk about heavyweight, so basically, the champion lineup is pretty much brand new across the board. And these guys have been dominant these past couple of years. I mean, look at this graphic. This group of champions is 53-0-1 in the last 4 years. And when we break it down to each individual fighter, basically everybody outside of Magomed Ankalaev has been undefeated in the last 4 years. The guys at the top are now very, very dominant in the UFC, have gone on massive win streaks, and have pretty much crushed the opposition up until this point. And if we replace Jon Jones with the true heavyweight champion and the newcomer Tom Aspinall in the last 4 years, Tom has been 6-1 in the UFC, with his only loss coming from leg injury against Curtis Blades, which he avenged recently. So with all these new faces at the top, besides Jon Jones of course, what can we expect from this bunch of champions? What are some good and what are some bad that is going to come with this new era of champion? I think this is the most well-rounded group of champions we've ever seen. Outside of Bilal and Merab, who just spam takedowns to dominate and win, every other champion is elite pretty much everywhere and can finish anyone, anywhere, or at the very least can mix the martial arts very, very well. The thing is, with this last generation that we just saw, a lot of them were just one-dimensional strikers. Izzy, Alex, Leon, Sean were all strikers that rarely mixed up the martial arts, which can be fun, of course, but for me at least, this made matchups really uninteresting to predict and break down. Pretty much all their game plans were to defend the takedown, keep the fight standing, and point their way to a victory or find the KO. Again, very, very fun sometimes, don't get me wrong. Who doesn't like a good kickboxing match? But we've seen those stylistic matchups over and over again. With this new era of champions, the stylistic matchups are new and vastly different, damn near impossible to predict, and just the anticipation of these potential super fights are through the roof right now. Off the bat, we have the most high-level, highly anticipated matchup of this year, which is Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. Both guys have elite grappling and elite striking. Both guys have been finishing practically all of their opposition in the UFC, and with Ilia Topuria moving up to 155, it will be extremely interesting to see how the power will move up with him, as I think both guys can legitimately finish the other. Will Ilia Topuria close the distance and crush Islam Makhachev with power and boxing, or will Islam take out Ilia with a high kick? Ilia's kryptonite in MMA. Are they going to grapple? How is that going to work? So goddamn interesting. And then you have another highly anticipated, extremely interesting stylistic matchup between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. 2 big and strong guys in this division, with one showing that he can finish the fight anywhere and the other running through guys with insane chain wrestling. I'm so interested to see if Dricus du Plessis can be strong enough and big enough and good enough to stop the freight train that is Khamzat Chimaev, and what he will do in the later rounds, or if we will just see Khamzat Chimaev finally achieve his destiny by running through another guy with his superior grappling to finally become champion. I just think these high-level matchups between top talent wasn't possible in the latter era of champions, where we saw pretty much the same thing. Strikers with good enough wrestling to deal with wrestlers, or wrestlers with good enough striking to deal with strikers. This group, for the most part, mix up the martial arts really, really well. And there's a lot more very interesting, hard to predict, stylistic matchups like a very well-rounded killer in Pantoja possibly moving up to fight Merab, or a Yuri versus Magomed fight that could happen, or a Shavkat versus Bilal, and maybe, just maybe, a Tom Aspinall versus John Jones fight. These are all very high-level matchups that we'll see grappling, striking, and everything in between get mixed up. We're no longer going to see the classic wrestler versus striker where the mode to victory is pretty clear cut and dry. Again, we're going to see pretty new stylistic matchups where everyone is elite pretty much everywhere, and I don't think we've seen this amount of top tier well-roundedness amongst the UFC champions. So that's the good. What about the bad? It's pretty clear that there's a big lack of star power with this bunch, at least for the casual audience. We have to remember a vast majority of fans are casuals. They don't watch every Apex card or even prelims on the main card of numbered UFC events. Most of them don't even understand grappling and just want to see Alex Pereira knock someone the fuck out. What most casual fans, and in turn what most fans want to see, are striking stars with personalities outside the octagon. They want to see a guy that's shit-talking on the mic, or at the very least, someone who brings energy and aura to press conferences. You're not going to get that for the most part with these champions. All of them are simply there to fight. Pantoja, Islam, Magomed, and Tom are pretty tame on the mic and, relatively speaking, respectful on the mic when talking about their opponents. Bilal kind of tried to go heel with Leon, but for the most part is tame on the mic like the rest of the bunch. Merab is pretty hilarious now, and I think is starting to win over fans with his chaotic personality, but he was also a guy that didn't do much on the mic historically. Then you have Ilia Topuria, who was talking shit in the lead up of Volk and was again talking a lot of shit towards Max, but it always felt like he was trying to be Conor to sell. The only guy that is really talking shit on the mic and is really effective at doing so is Dricus du Plessis, who made both his last opponents cry, and he's pretty hilarious. But Dricus du Plessis, unlike an Izzy or a Sean O'Malley even, doesn't really do much outside of the lead up of a fight. Izzy and Sean were big personalities when they were champions outside of an upcoming fight, have YouTube channels to get a sneak peek to who they are as a person, and really lived up a bright personality on social media. Dricus du Plessis, besides talking his shit in the lead up of a fight, doesn't really do much outside of fighting. And I'm not blaming him. Fighters shouldn't be obligated to be a star and to market themselves outside of fighting, but it definitely helps pay-per-view numbers and helps create star power. I think Dustin Poirier really describes that era here.
It was for us. It was for the dogs. It wasn't popular. It was for us. Now that money's, and I'm not complaining about money. I just hate the fashion show that it's turned into. I love watching Sean O'Malley fight, but just the outfits and the crazy flashy stuff, the characters, Kobe Covingtons, the Conor McGregors, it's not sport anymore.
And I know that video is titled Dustin on the New Era, but I think this is a perfect description of the era we're just leaving. The era we're leaving is an era that came out post-Conor. The formula to get to the top. The fashion show, quote unquote, Dustin talks about, and pretty much everyone tried to copy it. Izzy and Sean, and he was never really a champ, but Colby for sure. And now with the influx of champions coming from the Caucasus Mountains region, that culture is vastly different, and they really just want to mix the martial arts and not talk much. The strong, silent type, really. And even guys not from the Caucasus Mountains region just so happen to be pretty quiet on the mic personality-wise. So is the UFC running into a star problem? I don't think it's a huge problem, and I don't think it's a new problem. This cycle has happened before and will continue to happen in the future. You remember when this group of guys first became champion? Don't you forget, before Volk was extremely loved as he is today, he was hated in the past because he beat Max in a very close fight and an extremely close second fight where a lot of people thought the fan favorite Max Holloway won. It wasn't until he ascended to a new level against Max in their third fight and then gave us a thriller in the first Islam fight that fans started to like him like they like him today. And really that same arc is playing out with Ilia Topuria. As great as he still is pretty hated by casuals because he just so happened to beat Volk and Max, two fan favorites. Same thing is kind of happening with Islam, as he so happened to beat fan favorites Charles Oliveira, Volkanovski, and Dustin Poirier. But come the end of Islam's reign and when we near his retirement, the narrative is definitely going to shift and everyone is going to universally hail him as the lightweight GOAT and one of the best to ever do it. The same narrative shift we saw with Khabib, someone who casual fans hated because he kept beating the fan favorites, only to be hailed as one of the best and most respected post-retirement. When Kamaru Usman became champion, everyone hated the idea of him reigning over welterweight because he was a really boring wrestler up until that point, but everyone started to like him once he did this to Jorge Masvidal and is now one of the most respected former champions because he keeps fighting the best. I'm not going to say Bilal or Merab is going to make that exact shift and start knocking people out, but at the very least, I think think they've shown the potential to be more exciting as champions in the octagon. Mighty Mouse was really hated by casual fans because he was dominating a smaller weight class and now is regarded as probably one of the most underrated greats, and I think the same thing is going to happen with Pantoja. Long story short, we've seen this before. Champions, especially new champions, hated now only for them to get a couple more title defenses, and the narrative shift has been going on forever. It's going to take time for these fighters to be loved, and it's definitely going to be a little more difficult now that most of them don't have that out-of-ring personality, but fans will eventually come around, and I truly think that skill will trump all. Once these guys get some nasty title defenses and nasty, crazy stylistic matchups under their belt, they will be loved. So anyways, what do you guys think about this new era of UFC, this new era of champions in particular? Do you like them better than the era we just left? Do you hate them because they're not the biggest personalities in the world? In my personal opinion, I'm really liking this era because of the matchups we're going to see. The elite striking, grappling, and everything in between getting mixed up is going to be crazy at the top. But again, I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts, and thank you for always supporting. Peace.